Okay, welcome everyone. As we are sponsored by Shalom Fogel, Nishmas Yaakov Zeb ben Yehuda Aryeh, Rivka Bas Yaakov Yosef, Tivya Miriam Bas God, Yosef ben Tzim ben Yaakov Zeb, L'Refu Shalema for Moshe Aryeh ben Binyamin, and for great Shidduch for Chayet Tivya Bas Shoshana Gittel. We're sponsored by Baruch Ian, L'Refu Shalema for Liba Bas Anya, Nishmas Yaakov Chaim ben Abba, Esther Bas Yona, Ram ben Shmuel HaKayin, by A.B. Spry, and for the spiritual, emotional, and physical protection for Yeshua Menachem Mendel ben Bela Shendel Rivka, by Berish Gesem and L'Refu Shalema for Shoshana Bas Adina Chana, and by Mark Frank Khalil Nishmas, his father Yisrael Tzvi ben Chaim Yeshua Falik. We are holding on the bottom of Daf Mem Ches Amud Beis, on the bottom of Daf Mem Ches Amud Beis. We're holding by Ashkechan, which is 6 lines from the bottom. Ashkechan, 6 lines from the bottom. And you know what? It's already time to welcome everybody in because we have a nice crowd just to start off with. As we welcome in Ben Zion Kohn, Eddie Chazan, Shimon Klein, Yisrael Fisher, Dr. Guy, Marshall Castle, Shalom Fogel, Yitzi Fuchs, Yaakov Warman, Irving Fishbaum, Saba, Menachem Umansky, Mark Frankel, Dr. Block, Shelley Zeitlin, Rebbe Yafi, Dr. Udell, Itchy, Mo Kushner, Rabbi Kaniel, Menachem Chapler, Michal, Naftali Jablin, Moshe Lehman, Rabbi Kranz, Yitzi Muller, Daniel Rosenberg, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, and Ilya Shutman. That's 30 here, and in the shul we have a minyan with Berish Gesserman and Gedalia Engel, Avram Rezepkowitz, Chaim Kramer, Michal, Avram Chavin. We have Danny Vogel and Ruvain Shannon. What's your first name? Yehuda Solomon and Herschel Waldner. So, Marshall, you have 40. Now just get to work. 40 is 10 from the most sparkling bourbon that you could drink.
Offer an old esrog to each person who joins.
Yeah. At least offer an oil change.
We can have last year's.
Yeah.
If people are willing to drive down.
Yeah. Anyway, when you drive down, you'll find he doesn't have a shop. You know, Marshall. This whole thing is a mere fantasy that he has a car shop.
Finest esrog oil for every change.
Now, I just want to say a personal appreciation to Yaakov Warman. Yaakov Warman sacrificed in order to be on the shir tonight. His Rebbe in the morning is Rabbi Stefanski, and Rabbi Stefanski was in Lakewood. So he could have been enjoying seeing Rabbi Stefanski in person. I guess because of Tadir V'Sheina Tadir, this is our time, so he decided to stay on by us. But I think that's a sacrifice, and we're very appreciative to have you, Rabbi Yaakov. Okay, so Ashkechan Shchita Ba'oila L'Mitzvah. We have a source that we shecht on the north by Oila as a mitzvah, in other words, as the first instance. Kabbalah Nami L'Mitzvah Ashkechan. We also have a source that you catch the blood on the north also for a mitzvah. Shchita v'Kabbalah La'akev Minalan. By Ola, how do we know that both the Shchita and the Kabbalah must be, and if you don't do it, it invalidates? So says the Gemara, Amar Ravanda Barava v'Yisei Rabba Bar Shila, Kal v'Chaymer. We're going to learn a Kal v'Chaymer from Chatas. Oma Chatas haba mikoyach Oila. Chatas is derived from Oila, because it says Ki kasher tishachid Oila yishachid achatas, right? So we learn out Chatas from Oila. Oma Chatas haba mikoyach Oila. Ma'achatas, which only is derived from Oila. Oila is the parent. Ma'akeves, the Shchita and the Kabbalah are mandatory. Oila, Sheba Chatas Mikoicha, Oila, which is the parent, Oila, which is the source, Einoi din shemakeva, surely it should invalidate. Says but maybe chatas invalidates because it's superior, that it's mechaper for an isakaris, like chilul Shabbos, like chaylev, like dam. Amar Ravina hakash leilu Rav Ada bar Ava. This is what was Rav Ada bar Ava's kal v'chomer, because klum motzinu tofel chomer min ha'ikar. Do you ever find the secondary to be more than the primary? Chatas is secondary because it's only learned from Oila. Do you ever find the secondary to be more chomer than the primary? Let's just mute people over here. Okay. Amalei marzutra breid Rav Mari l'Ravina v'loi. Do we not find the secondary more than the primary? Vare Meiser, we know that Meiser Sheni, right, on the first, second, fourth, and fifth year of the Shemitah cycle, we take the second tithe and we bring it up to Yerushalayim. Now, somebody like Michal Avram, that's a very big farmer, he's not going to bring up all those crops to Yerushalayim, so you're allowed to redeem it. It says, he can redeem it. So, but we find Vari Meiser do nipta, the actual Meiser could be redeemed. V'ilu l'kuach bekesef Meiser, but then when he takes the money up to Yerushalayim, and what are you supposed to do with the money of Meiser Sheni? You're supposed to buy food, right? V'ilu l'kuach bekesef Meiser, if when he buys food and it gets Kedushas Meiser Sheni, that cannot be redeemed. Ein a nipta. So, for example, if it becomes tamei, it can't be redeemed. The Tanan halakuach bekesef meiser shenipta. If that which is bought with money of meiser, it becomes tamei yipta. The Tanakama says it can be redeemed, but Rabbi Yehuda says that which is bought with the money of meiser sheni cannot be redeemed. So therefore, you can't eat it because it's tamei, but rather you cover. It has to be buried. So you see that the secondary is more stringent than the primary, because the primary Ma'aser Sheni can be redeemed, but that which is bought with money of Ma'aser Sheni, that which is secondary, cannot be redeemed. So you see that the secondary is more stringent than the primary. Says the Gemara, very lumdish teretz. There it's not because the secondary is more stringent than the primary. In order to redeem something, the Kedusha has to be strong enough to pass over to something else. So the primary Ma'aser Sheni, the Kedusha is strong enough to pass over to something else. The secondary Ma'aser Sheni, the Kedusha, is not strong enough to pass on to something else. So it's not that the secondary is more stringent, as the Gemara explains. Hasam loy alima Kedushase, there the secondary, that which is bought with money of Ma'aser Sheni, its Kedusha is not strong enough lemitfas pidyaina, to pass over to that which you redeem it with. And that's why you cannot redeem it. Says the Gemara, going on to another subject, another example. V'harei tmura, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro.
Amen.
I assumed there was nothing cold, right? V'harei tmura. Now, what's a tmura? A tmura is where it's illegal, but if, let's say, Herschel has a carbon, and he takes another animal and he says, Zet tachazed, this should be instead of this, the din is that the Kedusha passes on to the new animal, and it remains on the first animal. That's the magic of tmura. Now, it's an amazing thing. If Herschel is makdish, a balmum, a blemished animal, it doesn't get Kedushas Haguf. It doesn't get intrinsic holiness. It can't be makdish, a balmum, a blemished animal. It has a cataract in the eye. It has a missing leg. You can't be makdish. But if he takes a blemished animal and says with the blemished animal that it should be instead of the original carbon, the Kedushas Haguf is chal on the Tmura. So here we have that the primary is less than the secondary. Because the primary, the Kedushas Haguf, can't be chal on the primary. But if Herschel says on a Baal Mum, Zeh Tachas Zeh, the Kedushas Haguf is chal on the Tmura. Now the Tmura is secondary. And yet it could be chal even on a Baal Mum. And that's the Gemara. So you see that the secondary could be more than the primary. Vare Tmura, the ilu kachim loichayli al Baal Mum kavua. The initial kachim cannot devolve upon something that has a permanent blemish. The ilu I chayla, while on the Tmura could be chal even on a Baal Mum kavua. Says the Gemara, and this is, again, a real lumdish answer. Says the Gemara, when Herschel is makdish an animal, it's coming from chulin to kachim. From chulin to kachim, you cannot make on a Baal Mum. But a tmura is coming from kachim. No, it's coming from kachim. It's not coming from chulin. So from kachim to transfer kachim, that's less of a trick. And there, that could be chal even on a Baal Mum. Let's see it inside. Tmura mikaya kachim kasya. Tmura comes from another animal that's kachim. The kachim, but the initial kachim that Herschel said from an animal of chulin that it should be kodesh on a Baal Mum, the kachim mikaya chulin kasi. That you can't do. Okay, the Gemara has another question. Hare Pesach, the carbon Pesach, we know that a carbon Pesach doesn't need, in other words, a Pesach that's brought on Erev Pesach doesn't need smicha, don't need a lien on it. It doesn't need libations, and it doesn't need that the breast and the shank should be waved. But if for some reason the Pesach was left till after Pesach, then the din is, it needs smicha, it needs waving of the chazav v'shaik, and it needs libations. So you see that the secondary is more than the primary. What an interesting question. Hare Pesach, duhu ein aton smicha nesachim etunufas chazav v'shaik. It doesn't need to be leaned upon. It doesn't need libations. It doesn't need the waving of the breast of the shank. V'ilo ma'isidi day. Let's say it got lost and you offered another one and you found it after Pesach. When you bring it after Pesach, turn smicha nesachim l'tunuvas chazav v'shaik. It needs leaning upon it. It needs libations and it needs the waving of the breast and the shank. So once again, you see that the primary is less than the secondary because the secondary needs all these things. Again, the Gemara answers with a lamdish teretz. And the Gemara says, a Pesach after Pesach, we learn out from a pasuk, it has a din of a shlamim. It's not that it's secondary. Once it has a din of a shlamim, it needs all the halachas of a shlamim. It needs smicha, it needs tunufas chazav v'shaik, and it needs nesachim. Pesach, b'shayim ha'isashana shlamim, it becomes a shlamim. It's not that it's secondary, it has a change of identity. It becomes a shlamim. It becomes a shlamim. So, Gedalia, you're right?
Yeah.
I get scared.
So then it needs all the things that a shlamim.
Shlamim needs.
But it loses kedusha.
It doesn't lose kedusha. It
requires now you to do these things to get the kedusha back up.
No.
Okay.
It becomes a different carbon. And therefore it has the laws of that carbon. It's not secondary.
You probably don't have the chumash either, like
What?
breaking bones and cooking.
Correct.
Probably.
Correct. It's a switch of identity. The Iba Yisema, now the Gemara says, okay, we have another answer. How we know that by Oila, the Shechita and the Kabbalah is ma'akev. disqualifies. If it's not in the north. The Iba Yisema Amakra Ha'ila, and it says Ha'ila, we learn B'mekayma Tehei. The Ha'ila teaches us that it should be in its place. Okay, so that's a second repetition, and we know when it repeats the law again, it's Lakev. All right. So Ashim Inal in the Beit Safin. So we've covered Ayla, we've covered Chatas. How do we know that an Ashim needs to be slaughtered in the north? Dichsiv, b'makam asher yishchatu esa Ayla, in the place that yishchatu Ayla, yishchatu esa Ashim. And we know the Ayla is done in the north, so that means that the Ashim also has to be done in the north. Ashkechan. So the Gemara says Ashkechan Shchita. So we know Shchita, Kabbalah Minalan. How do we know the Kabbalah? Because right next to it, it says as Dama Yizrak, and its blood should be sprinkled. Now, obviously, when it says its blood should be sprinkled, connected to the Shchita, it can't refer to the sprinkling, because the sprinkling is not only in the north, because it's sprinkled on two diagonal corners, and one of them is in the southwestern corner. So when it says as Dama Yizrak, it's talking about the catching of the blood. So Kibbel Damai Nami B'Safin. How do we know that Herschel, when he's catching the blood, we know his Klei Shabbos has to be in the Tzafin. How do we know that Herschel also has to be in the Tzafin? B'Kabel Atzmai Minolan, says the Gemara, well, it could have said Damai, and it says Ve'es Damai. Damai Ve'es Damai. Es Damai comes to include even the Kain that's holding the Klei Shabbos, he also has to be in the Tzafin. But again, this only tells us that it's preferable to do it this way in the north. Ashkechan l'mitzvah l'akev minalan. How do we know that if you don't do it, it invalidates? Then it says krach rinaksiv. There's another pasuk. V'shachar es hakeves, and you should shech the keves. And the pasuk continues. V'shachar es hakeves of ashim. Says the Gemara, but is this needed to teach me la'akev? To teach me that it invalidates? We need it to teach us what we learned in the Brisa. Now this is one of the less known of the 13 principles of Rabbi Yishmael. The 13 principles of Rabbi Yishmael, the 11th principle is davar shahaya bichlal, something that was included in a general group. The yatsa lidain b'davar achadish, and it goes out to teach us a new item. Once we learn the new item, it's ripped out of its group. You cannot return it back to its general group for all the other laws until the Torah returns it back to the regular group. Now, here's an example. By the Ashim, it goes out of its klal, the Ashim Mitzayra, goes out of the general principle to learn something new. That you put the blood on the big toe and the big thumb, the right thumb, and the lobe of the ear, the right lobe of the ear. So, Ketzad, V'shachar es hakeves, b'mekayim asher yishchat es hachatas v'ayla, b'mokam hakodesh, in the place of holiness, ki kechatas ha'ashimu. Because like the sin offering is the guilt offering. So it returned it back into the general principle of all guilt offerings. Now what is it? Now the Gemara speaks it out. It didn't have to say like a chatas, like a guilt offering. Ashim Mitzayra was taken out of its group for a novelty. B'bayin yad or b'bayin regel v'oizin yamanis. That you put it on the right toe, the right thumb, the right lobe of the ear. Now, I would say that as Rabbi Shmuel says, it can't be brought back into the general principle. So I might think that instead of it has these placements on the toe and the thumb and the ear, but maybe it doesn't need blood on the mizbeach and it doesn't need sacrificial portions on the mizbeach. Talmud loimer kechatas ha'ashimu. It needs the placement of the blood and the sacrificial portions on the mizbeach. So therefore, it's not extra to teach us a second source to tell me that the Asham has to have the Shechita and the Kabbalah on the north. Says the Gemara, Im Kain, if it's not Ma'akiv, Nichtav Bahai, write it only over here, V'loi Nichtav Bahai, and don't write it in the original place. Says the Gemara, Hanicha, that's good. If we hold that if it goes out to teach a new thing, it will not be able to. It will not be able to return back to its klal, but aval klaloi gamar minei. But the klal, that means the other Hashamas, we could learn from it. Then that's shaper. Then that's good. So then the other Hashamais, we will learn from it, and therefore it would be enough to say it by it, by the Asham Mitzayra. That when it goes out to teach a Davar Chodesh, it does not learn from the general group. And the general group is not learned from it. So then that's why it has to say it by the general group, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to learn from it. And then it wouldn't be extra to tell me that an extra pasuk for north. Says the Gemara, no. Because since it says kechatas ka'ashim, kaven the hadrei ahadrei. Once it was returned, it was returned. And once it's returned, you could learn out the general principle from it as well. And therefore, when it's repeated again by the general principle, it's coming to be ma'akiv. Now, Amalei Mazutra Breid Rav Mari Loravina. Ema Kia Hadre, maybe say that when it says Kachatas Ka'ashim, it's only Kia Hadre Kra Legabe Matan Domim Ve'murim. It only comes to tell you the placement of the blood and the sacrificial portions, because those are things that need kahuna, the by kahuna. Aval shchita, that it should be on the north, the loy by kahuna loy. Maybe loy mibayit safan. Says the Gemara, im kain, if so, it would have been enough to say ki kechatasu. It doesn't have to say ki kechatas ha'ashim. We know we're talking about the ashim. Im kain neima kra ki kechatasu. My kechatas ha'ashim, says the Gemara, kishara hashamas yiyu. It should be like the other hashamas. Lamali. Now. So that's how we know north. And that's how we know north is ma'ake. But now we have another problem. In the pasuk it says, "V'shachat es hakeves b'mekayim asher yishchat es hachatas v'es ha'oila." Why does it have to say both chatas and oila? They're both in the north. Why does it have to say both of them? It's enough to say one. Actually, the one it should say is oila, because oila is the primary source. Just say, "V'shachat es hakeves b'makom asher yishchat es ha'oila." Why does it have to say es hachatas v'es ha'oila? Let's see it inside. Lama li lakshiyeh lechatis, lama li lakshiyeh la'oila. Why do we have to juxtapose it both to the chatis, both to the oila? They're both on the north. Why do you have to say both? So Amar Ravina Itzrach, I akshay lechatis v'lo akshay la'oila. If it just juxtaposed it from to the chatas and not to the oila, you're going to have a problem. How do we know chatas? Because it says ki chatas ha'oila. So that means chatas itself is something that you learn out from a hekesh, from a juxtaposition. If now you're going to try to learn out Oshim from chatas, that's trying to learn out with a second hekesh something that we learned out with a first hekesh. And we said by kachim we don't do that. So Amar Ravina Itzrach, because I akshay lechatas v'lo akshay la'oila. If we juxtaposed it to chatas and we didn't juxtapose it to oila, havamina, where do we know chatas from? We know chatas because it says that ki asher tishachet ha'oila tishachet chatas. So we know chatas from a hekesh to oila. And now you want to learn out from chatas to oshim. The chatas meichan lamda me'oila. So davar alamed behekesh. Chayzer malamed behekesh, something you learn from hekesh, could you then learn out with another hekesh? That's why it has to say oila. So what's the obvious question? Just say oila. Just say yeshachet as a keves of an asham, kasher tishachet oila. Why does it have to say both a chatas and an oila? Amalei mazut ravina v'nikshe la'oila, juxtapose it to an oila v'loy nikshe lechatas. So this is beautiful. This is really, really Talmudic logic. Listen to the Talmudic logic over here. You're right. It could have said that you should be shachar as a keves, kasher tishachar oil, and then we would know the oil is in the north, and the ashim is in the north. The reason why it says chatas and oila is to tell you why did it have to say both? Because if it would say chatas, it wouldn't be enough. Because davar alamed behekesh eina chayzer malamed behekesh. And that's why it also says oila. And this is the source for davar alamed behekesh eina chayzer malamed behekesh, from the fact that it had to say both chatas and oila. Let's see it inside. Amalei mazut reid ramari l'ravina v'nikshe la'oila, just juxtapose it to an oila v'loy nikshe lechatas. Havamina, if it only said oila, I might think davar alamed behekesh chayzer malamed behekesh. I said, then why didn't it just say chatas? That's not a kasha. It could have just said chatas, and we would be able to learn it. But why should it say chatas? It should say the primary source. The primary source is oila. The chitay nikshe akushe lechatas. Well, no. Nechalei demakish leila iker. It makes more sense to say oila, which is the primary source. V'loy nakish leila tafel. But lahachi akshe lechatas v'akshe leila. The reason why it said both is to tell you that if it would have said chatas alone, you wouldn't be able to learn it, because that would be a davar alamed behekesh ein chayzer malamed behekesh. L'meima davar alamed behekesh ein chayzer malamed behekesh. That's a beautiful example of Talmudic logic. Rava says, really fascinating. We have 31 Zoomers here this evening, and it's really great to have everybody. And we are missing people. Barry Cement here tonight?
If he was, you would know.
You know why Barry? Barry might be at a shul meeting. Barry might be, there was a shul membership meeting tonight. And Reuven Pollack isn't here. Probably because of that also. We're missing a lot of people. Reuven Pollack isn't here. Mel Zachter isn't here. They have to ask me permission before they make these shul meetings. There's I guess just
It
being,
could be very difficult.
I guess just being Rav in a shul for 38 years doesn't give you much clout.
Cloud, but not that type of cloud.
Yeah, it doesn't give you much clout. But anyway, Rava says a different source. Do you, Gedalia, do you have to leave at 9? No? Okay. You know, there's an 8th game tonight. You know that, no? I hate to rub it in. You know, I was talking to my wife. My wife says to me, "What's the difference who wins? Don't they listen for the fun of it?" I said, "Well, no, you don't get it. You don't get it."
Dolly, you have money on this? No, no money.
No, only pride. Only pride. Only pride. Yeah, skin on it. No money.
Money's
But that's the best capital.
Yeah. Yes. You know how much kapara you get when your team loses the World Series in the seventh game in the 11th inning? That's a lot of kapara. A lot of kapara.
Don't rub it in before Gedalia.
Yeah, a lot of kapara. What do you mean? Well, if you chalk it up to kapara, it's good, you know? Chalk it up to kapara. I always say, when I look at you, I chalk it up to kapara. He's speechless. Anyway, by the way, I saw Florence today.
It's the effect of absolution.
Anyway, so Rava has a different source for a davar halamed mehekesh eino chayzer malamed behekesh. He has a different source. Rava ama mehacha. Dichsiv. Now this is a pasuk that's by. I'll tell you when we follow these psukim, we really need like to know which pasuk is talking about which carbon. So this pasuk is talking about the par kohen Mashiach. That's the power of the kohen gadol when he does a mistake. So it says by the par kohen Mashiach that we remove the fats, the kidneys, the diaphragm, as we do by a shlama. Now, why do if we already say that we do it and tells us what we're doing, why does it have to say like we do by a shlama? That's totally superfluous. Nothing superfluous in the Torah. So Rav Amma Mehacha, D'chsiv kasher yuram mishor zevach hashlam. Now ask the Gemara, Lamai Hilchasa. Why does it say that by the Parkai Mashiach we remove the sacrificial portions like we do by the Shlama? If it's to tell me about the lobe of the liver, or otherwise known as the diaphragm, and the 2 kidneys, it says that beferish by the Parkai Mashiach. Begufei ksiv. It says clearly that we remove. Not me? Huh?
It was me.
What is it? Okay, the bookie. Tell the bookie to call you later.
No, it's just waiting because he's collecting.
Says the Gemara, so if it's for the Yeseres HaKavod, the Shtei Klayis, Begufei ksiv. It says that in the Parsha of Parkai Mashiach. You know why? Because we got a problem. Mishum deboy agmure Yeseres HaKavod Shtei HaKlayis. We want to learn the sacrificial portions from the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur, from the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur l'Seira Avodas Kechav. In other words, we have 2 more kabbanas involved. We have the Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibur, which is the bull that, in case Bezdin makes a mistake, and the Seira Avodas Kechav, the Sar brought for a communal act of avodah zarah. Now, the parallel davar shel tzibur we know because it says we do it like the Par Kohen Mashiach. So it itself is a hekesh. And then we learn from it the hekesh to the Sar Avodas Kechavim. But you can't do that. You can't learn davar alam behekesh, you can't be chayzer malama behekesh. Now, begufay like ksiv, it doesn't say it by the parallel davar shel tzibur. Or mekar Kohen Mashiach or degamer. And we learn it out from the Par Kohen Mashiach. And that's a problem because davar alam behekesh ain't a chayzer malama behekesh. So how could we learn from the parallel davar shel tzibur, which itself is learned out from a hekesh from the Par Kohen Mashiach, and how can we then learn from it to the Sarah Avodah Zarah? That's why it says the extra kasher yuram b'shar zevach hashlamim, which is unnecessary because it already says by the Par Kohen Mashiach that you should remove them. So why does it say kasher yuram zevach hashlamim? So that's extra to make it as if it says it by the parallel davar shel tzibur. And then we could learn from it the first hekesh to the Sar Avodah Zarah. The halachi yitzter kasher yumim, the have command the kosa begufei, it will be as if it says it beferish by the parallel davar shel tzibur. V'lo nahave davar alama behekesh chayzim alama behekesh. Says the Gemara. Well, Amalei Rapapa L'Rava, why did we need to go through this ganze circuitous route? V'lichtevei begufei, say in the parallel davar shel tzibur outright that you remove the shtei kloyos and the yoseres hakaved. Why does it have to be done this way? V'loy nakish, and then you don't have to come on to a hekish. Says the Gemara, ikasa begufei v'loy yakish, if it righted beferish, and there wouldn't be a second hekish. Havamina, I would think davar alam behekish, chayzim alam behekish. I would think that that's okay. V'chi tema nakshe akushe. Well, you'll say that it says I might think that davar alam behekish chayzim alam behekish v'chi tema, and if you'll say that taka nakshe akushe, let the Torah do that. Says the Gemara, nichalei de kasvei begufei. It would have been better for it to be written beferish by the parallel davar shel tzibur. Mida'akish le'akushe, since it used a hekish, a double hekish, and it said kasher yuram l'shar zevach hashlamim, to make it as if it was written by parallel davar shel tzibur. Lahachi kasvei va'akshe. The reason why it did it that way is remember that normally davar alam and behekesh ain't a chayzer malam and behekesh. Something that's learned from a hekesh cannot be derived by another hekesh unless, as in this case, it says the extra kasher yurim l'shar zevach hashlamim, which was unnecessary, so that makes it as if it was written outright by the parallel davar shel tzibur, and then you could learn the Sarah Avodah Zarah with one hekesh. Now, okay, we have two sources that something that's derived from a hekesh cannot pass through another hekesh. Davar alam behekesh ein chayzim alam behekesh ima derava ima deravina. However, davar alamid behekish, something that you learn out from a hekish, maushiyam lamid b'gzeirah shava. Can you then take what you learned from a hekish and pass it somewhere else through a gzeirah shava? Could you do that? So now we're going to have a discussion about tzaras. Tajma, Rav Nasim ben Avtulmus Eimer. Now there's a unique halacha in tzaras. And that is if the whole human is covered with tzaras, his whole body is covered with tzaras, he's tar. That's called pricha. If tzaras flies over the entire body, the person is tar. It's a unique halacha of tzaras. Remember, tzaras is completely supernatural. It's not medical. And this is one of the halacha l'Moshe Messinais, one of the laws of the Torah, that if tzaras covers the whole body of the person, he's tar. Tajma, Reb Nasim ben Avtul Mesaymer, menayin lepricha begodim shehi Torah. Now we know this by tzaras of the body, that if tzaras covers the whole body, the person is tar. What about by clothing? If tzaras covers the whole clothing, is it going to be tar? So Tajma, Reb Nasim ben Avtul Mesaymer, menayin lepricha begodim shehi Torah. How do we know if tzaras covers the entire beged, that the beged is tar? Well, nema karachas v'gabachas bebegadim. It says the key words karachas v'gabachas by clothing, v'nema karachas v'gabachas ba'odam, and it says karachas v'gabachas by a human. Ma'ala halon, just like by a human parch b'kulei tar. If it spreads through the whole body, it's tar. So afkan by begadim parch b'kulei tar. But where does it say karachas v'gabachas by a human? It says it by the law of the scalp. Karachas is if there's tzaras on the scalp. Now, how do we know that if leprosy covers the whole scalp, that he's tar? V'hasiminolan. How do we know that if leprosy covers the whole scalp, he's tar? Well, that we know from a hekesh. From his head to his feet. The iskish roishoy l'regel, and we juxtapose the head to the feet, malahalan, just like the feet, which represents the body. Kulay hafach lavan parach kulay tar. If the white spreads through the whole body, he's tar. Afkan, so also by the scalp, kulay hafach lavan parach kulay tar. So here we have an example of something that we learn out with a hekesh. We go on to transfer with a Gzeirah Shava. Because we learned out from a hekesh that just like the whole body, if it's on the whole body, it's tar. So also by the scalp, if it's the whole scalp, it's tar. And then we learn out of Gzeirah Shava, karachas kabachas by the scalp, and karachas kabachas by begodim. So that's a Gzeirah Shava. So we have something that we learn with a hekesh that we then transfer with a Gzeirah Shava. Says the Gemara, I'm sorry, but this is not a good proof. Because the whole problem of learning something from something that we learned through a double derivative is only an inyan by kachin. Tzaras is not kachin. Says Gemara, Rabbi Yechim, B'chala Torah kula lameid in lamad melamad, chutz min hakashin, she'ein done in lamad melamad. So you can't learn out, because our whole question is only by kachim. And here we're talking about tzaras. The imkain, because if we would be able to learn something from a hekesh and then from a Gzeirah Shava, lo yomer tzafayna ba'ashim. We wouldn't need any source of shchita in the north by an ashim. The teisei b'Gzeirah Shava the kachay kachim mechatois. We should learn how to Gzeirah Shava from chatas. In other words, we learn out chatas from ashim, from a hekesh, and then a Gzeirah Shava from chatas to the other kachay kachim. Lav lememra doesn't this prove that by kachim the davar halamed behekesh, something that we learn out from a hekesh, because initially chatas was learned out from oilo and chatas hekesh. Why don't we say then we learn out a Gzeirah Shava from the chatas to the ashim? Because the davar halamed behekesh ain't a chayzav alamad b'Gzeirah Shava. Says the Gemara, v'dilma. But maybe the reason why we don't do it is mishum de'ikah lemifrach. We could say that you don't learn out of Gzeirah Shava from chatas to the ashim, because malachatas shekei mechaperes al chayvei krisis. Because chatas is more severe, it's mechaper on a chayvei krisis. Says the Gemara. No. You know when we ask a perch on a Gzeirah Shava? Only if the Gzeirah Shava is not mufne. It's not extra. But here the Gzeirah Shava is kachay kachim, kachay kachim. And there are many times that it says kachay kachim. Kachay kachim yisei ksivei. And when it says many kachay kachim, you don't ask a pircha that malachatas that it's mechaper for nisakaris. Elamai, why does it have to say that the ashim is slaughtered in the north? Because we wouldn't be able to learn it out from Gzeira Shava, because since we learned initially the chatas from the oila through a hekesh, you then cannot transfer from chatas to ashim with the Gzeira Shava kachim, because davar alama behekesh eina chayzer or malamed b'Gzeira Shava. I will say that was a mouthful. It really was. Anybody have any questions or no? No questions. Anybody have any questions?
There's so many questions.
So many questions. Okay.
Because it's deep.
Reb Chananya ben Akash Yamar, Ratzak Kadosh Baruch Hu l'Zakris Yisrael, Lefikach